welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, January the 24th, 2019. It's 8 a.m. in New York, 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, 1 p.m. in London, Sydney, Australia. It's 12 midnight wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And it's been a couple weeks since I had a chance to talk with my good friend Joel, but I've been looking forward to this, Joel, because it's been so long. It's like I when I say a daily dose of happy, for me it's like a weekly dose with you, and I'm in overdose drive here, so I'm addicted. Help me.
Well, that's a lot to sort of process. Walt, but, I'm really glad to be back. I always miss, as I've told you, I really enjoy the show as much as what I gain from it, and hopefully some other people gain as well. But we've been doing this a long time now, and I find great value in it. So I look forward to every Thursday.
Absolutely, I do too. It's the fact that you and I have been doing it the longest of all of my co-hosts is special for me. And I know you've been through watching my own development, and I've enjoyed being a part of and watching what's been going on in your life and in our relationship doing the show. And it's very gratifying. And to have more and more listeners listening in, that just is like cherry on top. It's wonderful. So, yeah. So that's the love fest for today. But
there you go.
I don't really have a topic in mind today. I figured, we'll make it a Q&A, and as people pop in, we can ask, answer questions that they raise. But I figure I'll just start off with some basics that are, kind of tied to stuff we've talked about in the past, because it all is tied together. But I think we ought to just take a little time to go back and just do really basic stuff just for a moment. Like, what is... not just what is the law of attraction, but how do you become a deliberate creator? Just right back to the very beginning, and see how our answers are different from where they were, say, 5 years ago.
Well, and that's such a great, we often will talk more advanced levels of law of attraction, or what some people would perceive, but as advanced. But you're right. When we look at the basics of how and where we go, and I've had several conversations this week around with other law of attraction practitioners, as well as just general, and to see the general people who are in the process who think, wow, how did I get there? And within the spectrum of the law of attraction, there's so many different variables in the way people believe.
Right.
One of the things that I was very opposed to for a long time in my childhood, and was the being forced into a religious belief, or a dogma of religious belief, that while I had saw value in some of what it was being taught, it was clear that some of it was just a little out there, for me at least. and the reason I share that is I also realized that in my search for the law of attraction, as I discovered I knew that was the answer, I also had to be wary of not getting caught up in that same thing on the law of attraction side.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just one version of something, and you get sort of like, I actually heard somebody use the term this week that they were a little disillusioned because they were very much the sort of the Abraham Hicks camp for many years, and almost viewed Abraham as a god, or as someone who, and that was a very interesting take, and they were becoming a little disillusioned because some of the stuff didn't seem to match where their life was going. And so one thing that I've tried to figure out, and I encourage everyone else to do, is we all have a basic personality type that is going to be able to sort of see things in certain ways. I have yet to find the one complete answer that fits everyone. At the end of the day, you can look at the dogma surrounding the law of attraction, and there is dogma for a lot of people, but what happens is the universe responds to your emotion, period. There's all kinds of manifestations of vision boards, and do you need to take action, or you just need to sit there? And you can argue the finer points, but the law of attraction simply responds to your emotions. What you're vibrating emotionally is what it picks up on.
Right.
And that's what it brings to you. And that's the basis of it. And then you can go in a million different directions from there. But as long as we always remain clear and concise with that one concept, I think we're fine.
And going in a million directions is what we do. We do a lot. I mean, we go off in a million directions every show, so it's not like we're unfamiliar with going off in a million directions.
Right. And it's great. And there's that's part of the fascinating process to me.
It is.
Here's a really good example. Like I will often hear, just almost arguments with people over the concept of the most frustrating thing that I see people deal with is when they get stuck on attracting a certain relationship in their life. That seems to be the one that everybody,
right.
Financially is what everybody originally gets into. But once they realize, okay, I sort of got this financial stuff, it's the relationship thing, it's you're not going to have the ability, at least in my belief, and again, I try to always say this is what I've seen over the years of doing this. I can't say that I want my ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend back, period. I can say that could be something I want, but it's not. The universe isn't going to respond. They can respond to, I don't want to be lonely. I want a fulfilling relationship. But when you try to out-manifest or out-attract what someone else is putting out there, that's where everything starts to come. Mike Dooley describes it as, there's 7 billion people on the planet all manifesting their stuff. And your manifestations and your law of attraction has to take place within the confines of that reality. And so the idea that somebody's horribly opposed to being with you and felt you horribly mistreated them or really, and you can spend all of your energy trying to manifest them back into your life. And that's not a likely scenario. And
well, actually, I've seen people who've done it. I've seen people who have actually managed to get those people back who are really not suited for them at all because they're so obsessed about it.
Right.
But nevertheless, they've managed to get them back, and then they're miserable because they're being treated wrong, or because it's not working out, or because they just walked out on them again, or something like that.
Yeah, I work with this client on the West Coast, and she a very high-powered business lady, and really, I really like her. I like her drive and energy. But she was in a relationship with this gentleman that is very toxic for both of them. It has a lot of verbal abuse on both sides, and they end up hating each other, calling the police, and then turning about. She literally had him arrested for abuse, and then turned around and bailed him out the same day.
Really?
And moved.
Oh,
so
wow.
Yes. And so she was stuck on she was addicted to the concept of having him in her life, and it was the only course of action she was looking at. And that sort of leads me to where I was going, is the one course of action is the problem that most people get stuck on with the law of attraction. Just this one, I only see it this way. The universe has limitless abilities to manifest or bring things into your life. But when you just simply only assign it one way for it to happen, I'm not saying it can't happen, but you limit the opportunity for your what you're really wanting to come true, because you're only giving it one path. And that's the piece that I shared for a long time. We talked about when I originally had the concept of coming up to Virginia. I had a vision board of a treatment center. I was a director of a treatment center in South Carolina, and we were dealing with gambling specific clients. And I had a vision of what a treatment center I wanted. I wanted a treatment center on a big plantation or big mansion. I wanted to do a lot of holistic stuff. I wanted different modalities, healthy eating, positive thought, law of attraction, all that. And I had this picture. I just found a random picture on the internet and put up on my vision board. The concept of treating gamblers, compulsive gamblers, in residential treatment is really difficult because the very nature of their addiction leaves them with no money. So financially, it was not a possible thing to do in my mind. I just couldn't imagine financially affording it, because the outflow of money versus what we'd be able to collect, and insurance doesn't generally cover the gambling addiction.
Right.
So, but I wanted it. And as you know, I manifested that. Now, it wasn't my treatment center, but I became director of that exact treatment center. Yeah. And while it wasn't the exact home, I promise you, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference in what that picture looked like in the home I ended up in.
Wow.
So, and I was director. I didn't start as I was like the gambling counselor. Then I moved into an operational director, and it was my program for 5 years. And so I brought that into my life. A very wealthy family had funded it, and then I moved on from that. But I did attract it, so I didn't get stuck on a course of action of I thought it would be my treatment center. I didn't think it would be in Virginia, but at the same time, that's what came along, and it's what I was able to bring about. We all do that, and that's the basic of the law of attraction to me, as we're trying to approach today, is figuring out what you're comfortable with, what your belief system does, and do not get into the argument of the stuff that doesn't matter in the law of attraction. Just
right.
like religion, you can get way off on tangents and lose the entire point.
Very true. Yeah. In fact, yesterday, Cindy Chavez and I, we've been doing an exploration of the works of Neville Goddard, and he has some really interesting takes on it. He has he's very scriptural in the way that he presents stuff. He himself is a very mystically religious Christian, but his take on the scriptures are quite different. It's not what you hear in church, so he interprets it completely differently from the way churches do. But nevertheless, there's that aspect to it. And yet, one of the most fascinating things that he presented was the idea of consciousness. And he doesn't actually present it specifically directly the way I'm about to describe it, but when you read it and you kind of peel the layers apart and understand what he's talking about, you realize that what I'm about to say is actually at the core of what he thinks. He talks about consciousness a lot. And for him, consciousness is not a single state. It is a series of states. And in fact, when we are stuck on somebody, I like the word that you use, you get stuck on somebody, or you get stuck on a thought process, or stuck on a situation, you just got to have that particular situation. It's basically us saying, here's this one state of consciousness, and that's the only one I want to have in my life, and not allowing all these other states of consciousness to just keep flowing through our lives. It's like it has to be just this one and none other, and it has to play out exactly the way I want it to in that state of consciousness. So it's basically us trying to fix the universe to work exactly the way we want the universe to work, which doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. But that's what we keep trying to do.
Exactly. And that's where that resistance comes, because people get stuck on this is what I'm after versus the feeling of what we're after. I'm looking for the abundance in all areas of my life. I want to, I want my definition of happy. I want to be able to do what I want to do. Have a career that I love. I have all of that. I have every bit of it, and I've attracted every bit of it in my life. I love that. Mm-hmm. However, if I get stuck on, I just specifically have to have this.
Yes.
Then again, I am putting that very limiting resistance out there, and that's where I've seen a lot of people not realizing they've achieved what they've sought. They just didn't see it the way they saw it, and the way they thought they would see it. And it's once you can sort of awaken them to that fact, that yes, despite all that, you have exactly what you brought about, but you've been looking for it in the wrong areas. Open up your eyes and see it's already there.
Right.
And it's like, wow, you're right. And that's what makes a big difference. So that level of consciousness you're talking about is there's multiple ways to approach things, and I really encourage everyone, because it's so fascinating to me. There's limitless teachers in the law of attraction. There's limitless practitioners that are that all have their own opinion, and I love the study of them all. I agree with some. I don't. I agree with a little of everybody, I think. Mm-hmm. And one thing my early childhood stuff taught me, and I'm adamant about this. I never want to get stuck in just one dogma or one way of thinking, that clearly there's multiple ways. The law of attraction at the end of the day is your emotionality and how that energy you put out from that and how it responds. That's all it is. The rest of the stuff is how do you get there. I often use the scenario. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, as we're talking, and if I were to say to a friend, Well, I would say to you, Walt, you're a friend. We'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I'm
Walt,
glad I'm a friend.
Yeah. I want to meet you at Atlanta Braves Stadium tomorrow in Atlanta.
Okay.
Well, you're in Connecticut. I'm in Richmond, and I want to meet you at 5 p.m. tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not going to sit there and argue with you how you do. I don't care how you get there, Walt. Either get in your car and leave now, go to the train station, go get on a bus, or fly, take a plane. I'm not going to argue the details with you. As long as you're there tomorrow at 5 and we agree on that, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of the way of looking at it. There's multiple avenues to get to Atlanta.
Right.
And, I can think of, okay, so what is it, 8-hour drive for me? It's an hour and a half flight. It's this, that, the other, train ride. All this stuff is there, and you're in the same position. It's just a different, how do we get there? And I often see one of the problems that I've have noticed is I will see a lot of battling over the how you get there part instead of accepting, here's where we're at, this is what it responds to, and all of the rest is basically what matches you.
Exactly. I mean, it would be like me telling you, since we're going to meet at Atlanta Braves Stadium, great, we're going to meet there tomorrow at 5 o'clock, but Joel, you got to take a taxi there. And never mind how much the taxi costs, you have to take a taxi because that's really the only correct way to get there. And if you don't take a taxi, I'm going to be really, really upset with you.
Right.
Which is insane.
And that happens. And that's the piece that I notice a lot is I will see the arguments of minutia when it comes, and not just law of attraction, there's other things, but you see it in the traditional religions. You'll see literal killings and wars and political upheaval over the concepts of within the concepts of what a religion is. There's argument within that takes people to the extremes, and that's a lot. That's most often resistance is when you get into that way. I'm a massive fan of Abraham Hicks's work, and some of it I don't feel matches where I'm at. I really don't. I don't think it works for my personality type, some of it. Whereas I'm a very action-oriented, I'm more of the, like Mike Dooley often speaks of stuff that I really like Mike Dooley's stuff.
Yeah.
You take action, you keep the overall concept loose. You want this, you want that, and allow the universe to fill in the blanks. While other people say, no, you put that specific thing up on the vision board. I've seen 30-minute arguments over that one argument, over that one concept.
Yeah.
And I don't really care. If that works for you, let's knock it out of the park.
Right.
Let's don't waste time with that. And so that's what I love. And by the way, Walt, in honor of you, I'm doing a lot of baseball analysis.
I was just going to say, I was amazed you wanted to go to a baseball game. Maybe you needed a siesta. I wasn't sure. But
I didn't say we were going to a game. I just said meet me at the stadium.
Oh, that's true. You did say that. You're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got a question from one of our loyal listeners in the audience, and the question actually ties in a little bit to what Cindy and I talked about yesterday with Neville Goddard, because like you said, I mean, I like to, and we here on the show like to go to a lot of different sources for information, and Neville was one of them. Neville was talking a lot about the concept I am in the chapter we were reading yesterday, which is also a mantra that gets used by a lot of Indian gurus, or just general, right. Yoga or yogic gurus tend to use I am a lot. And Nasha was asking specifically, what does Neville Goddard mean by I am? What's his particular take on it? So I'm not going to ask you to explain what his particular take is, because I know you don't really follow Neville very much. But I will start off by having you say, what do you think is the value of I am as a mantra, as a thing to be telling yourself and believing in yourself, and then I'll try to give what I think is Neville's answer to the question.
Okay, I appreciate it, because I was going to really have a rough time answering.
Yeah, I know. You don't really you don't follow the Neville stuff very much, I know.
Yeah. But I do concur with the concept of, I often use this in my private practice. There are no more, the most important statement you can ever make in your life is what follows the words I am. It is what you're programmed for. It is the subconscious programming of who you are. I am what are you? When I ask that, I'll ask that, complete the sentence, I am. And whatever you say after that, there's nothing more important, because that's the subconscious programming. And the use of I am is a declaration to me of an attempt to do literally reframing the brain, reframing I am, and fill in that blank. It's so important. Because I think that the inner dialogue that we have all day, we all have an inner dialogue that's going on. And I'll throw crazy statistics out there, and none of these are proven. So before you fact check me, just email Walt at
Absolutely,
LONJ.net.
That's right.
Yeah, but anywhere between 40 and 81,000 thoughts we have in a day. People have claimed that's what the average person thinks in a day. And of those thoughts, the average person has 92% of the exact same thoughts of the day before. So you're thinking the same thing repetitively, or saying, when I say thoughts or inner dialogue, what we say to ourselves. And then within that, 90% of those are negative in nature or self-defeating in nature. So that inner dialogue, and we're programmed for that. We're programmed. There's vernaculars in our society that say, Murphy's Law, if it can't go wrong, it will go wrong, all this other stuff. So we're programmed into that, oh, wow, I can't believe that happened. So part of the reprogramming process starts with, who are you? In one of my huge arguments and one of my big disagreements with the 12-step programming for people in addiction, I think they do some good work in some areas. But when you force somebody to stand up and say, I am Joel and I'm an alcoholic, you are making a declaration of now. You're making a declaration of what you are at that point, and I think there is nothing more destructive that program does than that. It's a personal opinion, but I will say, because I'm a recovering compulsive gambler, I will say I am a former compulsive gambler in long-term recovery. That usually angers people, which, of course, you can imagine how much that upsets me. But
that much.
yeah, exactly. But you get my point. So that's a long answer to, I don't know, what your feelings of I am or what Neville's feelings of I am. But to me, that is the single event that I look at daily, that what am I saying? What am I thinking? What is my reality? My reality starts with I am, and like today, I am grateful. I'm incredibly happy. I'm incredibly blessed. I have a lot of I ams that are incredibly positive.
That's really good. Yeah, I like that. And actually, that's not all that far from what Neville talks about. Neville specifically uses the concept I am as a way of tuning into the inside of ourselves about our own consciousness. His consciousness is a really big concept for him. And the statement I am becomes a way of connecting into what I like to call my higher Walt, or IW, as I've been suggested by Alex King. I should call it my IW. But my IW is where I connect into source, to what people call God or source energy or the universe or whatever. It's where I connect into all of the energy that connects us all together. And that conscious statement, I am, is a way of me being in that stream and connecting to how I am in that stream. So I am becomes the basis for everything I want to attract in my life, and everything that I want to live in life, and everything that I want to be in life. It becomes the focal point for all of that. So he suggests using I am as your first place to start from when you want to bring something into your life. And he has a very specific process that is similar to the Abraham process in terms of attracting stuff. He actually kind of fuses a couple of the concepts together. But overall, it starts from I am. It starts from a recognition of me as a being and recognition by myself of me as a being. Because that I'm the one who's doing the attracting. I'm the one who is manifesting. I'm the one who is deciding. I'm the one who's putting the limiting beliefs out. I'm the one who's removing the limiting beliefs. It's all me. It's all happening with me. It's inside me. It's part of who I am on the non-physical basis. It's all that in one great big package. So whose I am or what is I am, that's what I am is from Neville's point of view. I am is the nascent point of consciousness. It's where consciousness begins in me. And hopefully that helps you, Nasha.
I think that's what I always encourage people to do as well. And I love the questions because that's part of what I'm encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
I love people finding their own discovery. I would love to hear our listeners say, look, I'm going to research this week, and next week I'm going to tell you what I feel about it. And that's the beauty of it. I love to hear other people's opinion. I've had some really early people early in the process of law of attraction really come up with some brilliant concepts that I never even thought of. So, when you're looking at this or you're coming along with it and I love that you go instinctually with what feels, instead of just taking one of them because, they're and most of them, Walt, are very similar in nature.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It's like they're very similar and we all get to the same place. So I think we always start there, but that the study of how each one does it is fascinating to me. And that's sort of and that's what keeps me so alive in this. Instead of getting frustrated with, Abraham Hicks, they said this, and I don't think that matches where I'm at. Somebody's going to match where you're at. Look at that and see where that is and see what you can come up with. I mean, Abraham doesn't care. Law of attraction doesn't care. It makes complete sense.
Absolutely. In fact, Nasha did actually give us some follow-up on what she was thinking. She said, I was told that God, it's like the metaphor, God is a tree and we are the branches, and that means I am, as in you are a part of God just like branches. And then she followed that up by saying, you guys are too good. So I guess we're hitting the mark. And then she follows that up by saying, as in I am is a part of stating that you are a part of God. So
yes,
there we are.
Yes. And I love that, by the way. And again, I really appreciate that input as well, because that whatever your definition of God or where you're at, and I have mine, and the fact that I am is a statement that I am within that context. I am within God. God is within me. We're all of that. And that's where the energy of the universe exists. And that's when you're really getting into the depths of everything you aren't, the label. I often share about the young man that we talked about several times in the show, that when I asked him to tell me about himself, he said, well, I am oppositionally defiant. I am depressed. I am ADHD. And that was so relevant. I hear that all the time. That where people say it in different ways. I have one person that I know that every time, how you doing? Okay.
Right.
Okay, well, that's really, yoo-hoo, wow. Yeah. And I said, and I'll point out, have you noticed that you've been, okay for the last 10 years?
Yes, right.
I know. Okay. Well, let's figure out the common denominator here. It's probably you. But I do concur that the exploration of all that, and one of the things that, if you listen to a lot of the, when you get really that next level stuff, some of the Seth books and, all that, where they really get into the concept of we are God, we are that stuff. And that's what, and that's what a lot of the Buddhist stuff that you find that when you really start looking, instead of looking for the differences and everything, when you look at the similarity, it's amazing how much, religion, traditional, Christian religion or Buddhism or, all the different, Hinduism, they have a lot of similarities and they're saying a lot of things, but we are programmed to look for the differences, and that's what we argue over.
Right. Yes. Isn't that interesting how the differences grab our attention so easily? Because we actually gain more by noticing the similarities, but somehow the differences capture our attention. And I guess it's because, to use the Abraham term, we live in a world of contrast. Which is basically a world where we get to decide, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, I want to track that, I don't want any more of that sort of thing. And in doing all that, we still end up kind of dipping our toe or sometimes our leg or sometimes our entire body in the contrast. Sometimes it gets in over our head, and that's where we get stuck. We're trying to figure out how to climb out of it. But nevertheless, the fact is we live in that kind of a world. And within that kind of world, we're going to notice the differences all the time, whereas the real strength comes in recognizing the similarities.
Well, and we have one of the things when I've been director of several residential treatment centers over the years, and in a capacity of managing a bunch of different people. And one of the things that has always amazed me is, everywhere I go, everywhere I work, I'm required to do evaluations of my employees. And my supervisor would always, if I had a supervisor, if not, then the owner or somebody, the board of directors would do it.
Right.
But I would always be evaluated as well. And so I always was taught that, okay, I evaluate on a scale of 1 to 5, and 1, if you get a 1 on anything, you wouldn't be sitting there. So I don't give 1 because you wouldn't be there.
Yep.
And I don't give 5s. 5s means you have done something super extraordinary. It's just way out there. You'd have to really, I'm looking for 3s and 4s are really good. A 2, you better be cautious. And I explained that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no one ever gets all 4s, and I have to give an honest account.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I have 100-point evaluation that I've used in different, and I always tend to be positive, but I always look for areas of improvement. I really do. I think that's good for people. So in general, if I have above average employee, I'll throw a couple of 4s in there in the area they strengthen, and I'll do maybe a 3 minus and say this is an area that I'm concerned about. I do work on, but I take a lot of time on each evaluation for each person, and so anytime that I could give somebody 94 4s, 5 3s, and 1 3 minus. And what do you think their energy and effort is placed on?
3 minus.
The 3 minus. Yes. And it just because and that's universal. That's where I'm working with doctors or whoever. I mean, because we have a tendency, you're saying, the contrast or the area of criticism is where we tend to, almost get defensive. And, I see that in life, and I think that's where the differences come. When you hear the religious arguments of the world right now that we have, and all this stuff, and political differences, what it boils down to, and I've discovered this is pretty impressive to me. What it boils down to is, I heard of somebody describe this. It's the fear of a lot of these political arguments, the fear over your belief system is wrong, and I have to argue with you. My world's going to change. There's one young lady in the Senate or Congress, I believe, right now. She wants to have a 70% tax on the super wealthy. No chance of that happening, but oh my goodness, that's where all the energy and focus is. Oh, Absolutely. She can't do that. She can't do that. It's amazing.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing that's where the focus is. Because and we look at our political divide and the hateful nature in which all sides talk. I'm not taking a side.
Oh, absolutely.
They're all equally wacky at this point. And so you see all that, and being able to step back and realize that within the law of attraction, I don't want to ever become that law of attraction where my way is the only way. I can tell you what has worked for me, and I've seen other things that I would never imagine working for me work wonderful for someone else.
Sure.
That's the beauty of it, because that one commonality of what emotion we put out there is what the law of it. That is the commonality of all of this. The rest of the stuff is how do we adjust that emotionality.
Exactly. I agree with you. By the way, you mentioned the concept of job evaluations. And you may or may not be surprised to hear I'm not a fan of job evaluations. And the reason I'm not...
Oh, no, they're terrible.
Yeah, and the reason is not because, it's bad to tell somebody what they're doing well. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't need to do a job evaluation in order to do that. The whole point of a job evaluation, it took me a long time to learn this, but the whole point of a job evaluation is not to help a person know how to move ahead. That's what the reason is given for doing it. Okay, this is how you can move up in the company. This is how you can achieve your goals and so forth. We're explaining to you where you're at, and now you'll know how to get to where you want to get to. That's the reason that's given. It's not the real reason. The real reason is the employer wants to fend off all of these complaints that I should be moving up, I should be paid more, so on and so forth. And so they create the job evaluation program in order to accomplish exactly that. And then in the job evaluation program, they find all the little things that are not quite right. Oh, yes, these are the things that are right, but there's other things over here that are not right, knowing perfectly well that the people who they're giving the job evaluations to are going to be focused on that 3 minus. That's the whole purpose of them. It's a very divisive thing.
Yeah.
Personally, my own approach, the thing that I use when I have my own employees, I never ever do job evaluations. Instead, I look for what people are doing right and I praise them for what they're doing right. And that's my job evaluation approach. That's the entire approach in one package.
Well, and that's why I love that. And one thing that I try desperately to explain, when being in the field that I'm in, when I'm director of a residential facility or a treatment facility, job evaluations are mandated by our licensing. We have to evaluate each person. If it were something up to me, I'm with you. I think it's the most ridiculous thing on the planet. However, they are usually a licensure requirement that you perform that and blah 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 blah. So you have to be accredited and do the stuff you have to do. You have to do job evaluation, really, and use the forms that they use, so that the accrediting agency usually suggests. Right. So it does make it difficult. And I'm with you, and the idea that we do have that tendency. I am very appreciative of criticism. I enjoy it. I never argue back with criticism unless it's done in a hateful nature or something. But if somebody said, hey, and I've often said, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm okay with that. I don't want to be everybody's cup of tea. It's just find out what works and move on. And the idea that we have to be all things to all people, that's resistance within the law of attraction. And being very comfortable with what works for you and how it goes. I don't need to defend how I got to my beliefs. I'm welcome to share them, but I try not to ever defend against the argument. Right. People have a differing view.
Right. Yeah. Well, you mentioned politics. That happens all the time. The fact is, politics is all negative. It's all about tearing down.
Right.
And the whole purpose of argumentation in politics is to tear down. Now, if you actually say that to somebody who's a political activist, they'll take offense at it. But nevertheless, the very next breath that they take, they will use to tear somebody down. So it gets kind of hard to defend that position after a while. And I keep asking myself, what if we were to give up politics entirely? What if we would just kind of throw that out the window, start all over again, and take an entirely different approach to the way we treat other human beings and to the way we deal with other human beings? What if we were to actually not look at other people in terms of what we're afraid of, and start looking at people in terms of what we love about them? And as soon as I think that, I realize now that actually can't be the first step. The first step has to be inside. And that ties back to what we were talking about with Nasha. It has to start with that I am. It has to be a positive affirmation of ourselves in order to even get to the point where we can be reaching out to other people and telling them that we love them too, or that we appreciate what they're doing, or we think that this particular thing they're doing is a terrific thing, or whatever. That's until we as a culture, as a society, as a worldwide culture, start adopting the idea of I am inside, all that other crazy negativity is going to keep right on spinning.
Well, and that's such a sad state of affairs in a lot of ways, because it is what works now. It's what gets people's attention. It's what sells.
Oh yeah.
The idea that politicians are only going to do what gets them elected, and if their perception is this crazy, bombastic, blah 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 blah, and it's working. So and both sides are using it. The part that gets me is the argument that because they both are doing it.
Oh yeah.
Well. We're
pointing.
not doing this. Well, you're doing. It might be a different form, but it's all taking place, and we will never all come to a consensus on everything. We all have different experiences. The view of the world from the window out of my office in Richmond, Virginia, is a different view than I'm in a really nice area with a lot of green, right near a lot of doctor offices and a hospital, and so I'm in a really nice area, and but yet you go 5 miles down toward, a different part of town, and they have a different view.
Right.
And both literally and, and suggestively, it's sort of like, yes, they get to see, and that's what we're looking at. Your filter, your lens that you view the world through determines a lot. And I always try to get people to say, you're in charge of that lens. Mm-hmm. And that's what people don't understand. And when you can figure out, I can adjust how I'm looking through that lens and, focus on my stuff. Let me be, and then fill in the blank and then live that instead of worrying about, it often gets into, well, I am this, instead of putting a period there, I am, and then you are. And then I try to label somebody else because they're not what I am.
And it's not just politics. I mean, you mentioned relationships before and how people can get very fixated on having one particular kind of relationship. Well, that's also a function of I am, or more precisely, lack of I am. Because that's how many times, I mean, you get this all the time as a life coach. How many times do you end up with somebody in your office, you're trying to help them through some sort of relationship issue, and at some point in the conversation about that relationship issue, the finger pointing starts? I mean, that's like every day for you, isn't it? Every hour.
Oh, it is that's the hardest part to undo. When I have a family that has a lot of dysfunction with addiction or whatever, one of the most fascinating concepts is if I were thinking, because I bill per hour per session and all that, and
right.
I can make a lot more money by just sitting there and letting them argue and point fingers and blame. I can stir that. I could sit there for 8 hours a day with one family and just check, and do that because that is the pervasive thing. Well, do you remember when you said this, or when I was 16, you did this, and you told me to do this, that created it, and then and I responded to it, and you're like, oh my God, and it's so rehearsed, and they don't hear each other because it's been such a dialogue for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exactly right. It is the lack of communication that takes place where you're not hearing the other people. You're forcing your opinion on them. And again, I have several professional athletes that I work with. And I had a really good conversation with an NFL player of mine, and he is from a really rough part of, I won't give any specifics, but he grew up in a very rough area, very inner city area.
Right.
No father in the household. 6 of his 10 best friends were killed by the time he was 16.
Oh boy.
So obviously a very, very rough environment.
Yeah.
He literally has seen police officers plant guns and do these things and really, do a lot of inappropriate stuff.
Right.
So when he kneels during the national anthem, and I'm not taking a side here, I'm just stating his belief.
Yeah.
When he kneels for the national anthem, he doesn't understand why everybody gets so upset because he said, I'm not kneeling against people that have fought in war. I'm kneeling against the inequity of minorities in some of these big cities. That's why I'm trying to draw attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and I hear you, and I acknowledge that. And I said, but can you hear the other side of that? Not taking a side of what's right. I said, well, there's people in the stands whose family have died for the representation of that flag, and they're viewing your kneeling, and they're viewing you're disrespecting what their loved ones sacrificed. He goes, that's not the case. I said, I know it's not, but that's not what they're picking up on, the perceptions. And if everybody could listen to the other side,
yes,
and understand what they're trying to say, it would make more sense. But neither side could hear the other side because they're too busy stating their position, and
too busy pointing the fingers.
And again, I'm not taking any stance on that. I'm just simply saying that's the basis of, and that's an example politically where we get in the middle of minutia.
Oh yeah.
That if you really understood what this young man went through as a child, you'd have you could say, wow, I didn't grow up where I had the security or safety where the people in my community are supporting. So yes, he wants to make that statement. So it's a very complex thing that you see that all the time, Walt, and that's where I happen to believe that we're all basically pretty decent people in the beginning, and life happens, and you develop these things over time, and you know it draws us further apart, drives us further apart, and then when the political environment is screaming and yelling and then making this something that it's not, we're getting further and further apart when that's allowed to happen, and that's where that I am process is so incredibly awesome, because if we could break it back down to I am good, I am loving, I am this person, I am a law of attraction practitioner, whatever you want to fill in the blank, instead of what you are. I don't need to label you anymore. I can just fix me.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, thinking about families are a place where there's often a great deal of dysfunction, a great deal of abuse and so forth. And again, like you said, you could spend 8 hours a day collecting from, just watching families point the fingers at each other all day long. As that finger pointing happens, like you said, it's like the other side has heard all the finger pointing arguments so many times they just kind of blank it all out. So you have two parties, two sides that are pointing fingers at each other and screaming stuff at each other, and neither side hears what the other side has to say, what they feel. It almost becomes like a pain contest. My pain is worse than your pain. And you disrespect me if you don't like my pain. And the other person saying, well, no, my pain is worse than your pain. You disrespect me if you don't love my pain. And so it's a pain contest. Like, who has the greater amount of pain? I do. No, I do. No, I do. I have more pain than you. No, you don't. I have much more pain than you have. All that kind of stuff. It's crazy. That's what we do.
I literally have had a family almost say, you almost nailed the dialogue at every family meeting I have at some point. But I had one young man stand up, very frustrated. He goes, I'm the victim here.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother stands up and goes, oh, hell no, you're not. I'm the victim here. And I said, oh, my goodness. I stopped him. I go, so the winner is the victim?
Yeah.
I said, wow. So you're now, and it was such a baffling statement to see them. It was amazing, Walt, to see that, and they were just so passionate about being the victim, or, it's like, why is that winning? I don't understand why that's winning.
I think
it makes no sense.
It doesn't really make sense. It makes sense on one really dysfunctional level, and that is the only thing I have right now is pain. The only thing I have right now is frustration. That's the emotional state that I'm in. So I'm going to tout that, which is not healthy, and is certainly not in alignment with what your inner being is saying. Your inner being is saying, no, feel good. This is supposed to be an enjoyable experience, being alive. But when you're angry, when you're frustrated, you're not in that mindset. So, by God, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're depressed, you're going to use it. Heck, turn it into a weapon if you can, because that way you can get what little amount of energy from somebody else that you can get. And any amount of energy is better than none at all. So, that's kind of what the mindset is.
Right. And that's such when you look at it, that develops within the family structure, the family system, or the work system, or the political system, or then, when you look at whatever systems you have going on in your life, when that need to be the most injured or the most painful, or that victim mindset is so incredibly debilitating, because talk about the resistance to the law of attraction. When you're in that victim mindset, you're vibrating the victimization of yourself, and it's like law of attraction says more victimization coming up as you requested. It's just more. And that's to me, everything that I look at, one of the things I look at, I see nothing more debilitating than the victim mindset. And it's very sad. And the idea that, we are our own solution. We are our remedy. Our perspective is in our control. My emotions I have the ability to control how I'm viewing things, how I respond to it, I'll see people twist and turn on that all the time. It's really fascinating, and I'm not critical. It's where they're at.
Yeah.
I have great empathy for people that have been there. I've been in the self-pity mindset. I've been immobilized by my self-pity. I kept having more things delivered that I could be show more self-pity toward, because I kept feeling that self-pity. And once I resigned from that committee, and said, no, not anymore. And, it all changed almost instantly.
Yeah, it's pretty quick, isn't it? It's really true. Shelley made a great comment, too, in the comments section. She said they want their experience to be validated. And that's true, I think.
Yes.
They want it to be validated. I am the most pained person. I am the most injured. I am the greatest victim. I am the person who has been harmed the most. I want that validated. That's really true.
Yes. Well, and somehow it's almost like somehow your validation then it gives it more power, and that's where I go back to your most powerful energy, your most powerful moment is when you're able to adjust the I am. I don't need someone else's validation for my harm or my hurt or what my perception. I just need my validation, and that's where that I am makes such a big difference. That's such an astute observation, because the seeking validation for your injuries or your harm, it's part of the cycle, and it is what we've been. That's what we're fighting against on some level. Obviously fighting against something is resistance, but you get my point.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we're trying to.
Well, it shows what our language is like. I mean, we have this built-in language that we use that is in itself confrontational and fighting. I mean, it's built into the language. Yes. We're habitually tied into it.
Right, and we've talked about, you and I've talked a lot about that inner dialogue stuff. It's that inner dialogue stuff is so important. And I am participates in that. I am what you're believing about yourself, and if your entire mindset is built on the fact that the world has always treated me wrong, and I'm always the victim here. That's all you can be, and I can think of no more sad life than that. Versus that incredibly resilient. There's one of my Facebook posts in the last few days has been about this young lady who it shows a young girl. She's 4 years old, and she's just now walking. She has cerebral palsy, and she's just now walking. And she says, "I'm walking. I just took a." And she is so incredibly enthusiastic about that first step.
Sure.
And you look at her, she's like, wow, she is walking. Instead of focusing on, I took till I was 4 years old before I could walk. I mean, that's
it could. Yeah.
She's not that. Yeah. There's none of that. It's simply, I'm walking. Look at that big step I just took.
Exactly.
I would love to bottle that incredible energy she has and go forward.
Yeah.
And be able to distribute that around the world. That's incredible.
Wouldn't that be something? Well, actually, in a sense, we can. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. The thing I've been doing, I did it for quite some time. For a couple months I did it, and then I stopped for quite a while, and I started up again about a month ago. Mirror exercises, where I look in the mirror every morning. It's my second thing to do. My first thing is feed the cats because they're demanding the attention. Then the second thing I do is I go to the mirror and I just start talking to myself in the mirror, saying all these positive things to myself, things that I don't normally hear throughout the day. Basic things. I love you. I think you're terrific. I really think you're doing a great job. You're doing all these wonderful things. You're helping so many people. People are liking the podcast. Your relationship with your wife is great. You have these great friends who are your co-hosts. I just keep doing all these things like that, talking to myself, reinforcing for myself all these good messages that deep down I and everybody else wants to hear, because we all really want to hear it. That's what we're really looking for when we're looking for validation. We try to get validation in the unhealthy ways, but what we're really looking for is the positive validation inside, the one that feels really, really good. And that's what I like about the mirror exercises. Mirror exercises help me get that. I literally get a daily dose of that before I even do the first podcast of the day. And I imagine to myself, well, maybe mirror exercises aren't right for everybody, but what if everybody did something along that line, some way to reinforce for themselves, hey, I'm a pretty good person. I'm pretty special. Look at the wonderful things I did yesterday, and then itemize what those things are and kind of relive them and say, I'm going to do some more good things that really make me feel good inside, and itemize what they are and think about them and talk about them. What if we did more of that? I think it would be a tremendously different experience.
Well, that's there's a book called The Miracle Morning, and it's a great book. I listened to it, and it's the concept of starting your day with finding out what works. So there's mirror exercises or meditations or
whatever.
Listen to motivational podcasts, but making an effort every morning to start the day of attitude adjustment or thought adjustment, of the vibration adjustment. And it's such an amazing tool that if more people would I think my perspective would benefit greatly by just taking the time in the morning to figure out what is the most positive thing you can do for you, and what works best for you, and spend that energy there. And you really frame the lens of the day. You get to frame how the day is going to look to you when you do that. And it's when you start off the day. Years ago when I was in the middle of all my chaos and crazy, Mondays were the absolute most scary day of the week to me. It was very crazy. Well, I love Mondays now. I really love Mondays. Mondays are a much different place for me right now. I love them. But it took me a long time to get there, and it was something that, I had to change my perspective of Mondays because I was beginning to hate Mondays, and Mondays were beginning to hate me.
Sure.
Because I put that out there. Now, Monday's my favorite day of the week by simply changing my perspective of that. And that's the power we have. That's the beauty of it right there. Absolutely. Is the most basic part is we're in control of that perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love one of the practices. You haven't talked about it lately, but one of the practices you have is whenever you get a new client, you give them a copy of The Secret, which I thought was a really great thing. Yes. You just buy bulk loads of copies of The Secret, used copies or wherever, and just give them out to new clients as they come through the door. And I just think to myself, if I don't know how many of the people actually read it, but let's assume we'll be really conservative. Let's assume only a quarter of them read it, okay? And of that quarter who read it, you get, I don't know how many clients you get coming through your door. Maybe you get 40, 50, 80, 100 coming through your door a week. I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, you get a quarter of those reading The Secret every week, and then you multiply that over the weeks and months and years. My God, you've helped hundreds and hundreds of people understand that all they have to do is change their own mental thought process, and life gets better for them. That's wonderful.
I order I get used copies tons of times, and I don't have great accounting systems for this. Just the email stuff that I have in place that I can figure out. I have purchased and over 2,000 used copies of The Secret in the last 5 years.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and I have 7 of them at my office now. So using some basic math, that's a lot of books.
Yes.
And within that, and as we talk, I always caution people, always tell people, read it. There's never been a better opening, beginning, introductory concept to the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. It is the best document for that. Mm-hmm. It is not the most comprehensive,
nope.
And I don't agree with some areas of it a lot of times. I think it focuses on some wrong things. But so if you're looking for a critical review, but I still think I would no more hand someone a copy of Abraham Hicks's Law of Attraction as their first introduction. They would run. It's a great book. I love it. It's amazing. But it's so far out there for that first The Secret is the gateway. It's the AOL of the internet years ago. It's the gateway to the internet.
I love
it. It frames it up enough where it's a palatable thing. I have somebody that heard one of our podcasts and never thought about law of attraction, and downloaded a copy of Jane Roberts' Seth Speaks.
Oh boy!
And wrote me and said, "You're crazy."
Yes.
I said, "Well, if you start with that one, I am. Yes.
Yes, right.
Yes, that's not. Yeah, I mean that's way out there.
Oh yeah.
And that's not something that most people are going to gravitate toward in the beginning.
Right.
But the secret is, and so that's the beauty of it. It's like we change that one book at a time, and a lot of people say, "Do you want this book back?" And I go, "No, I want you to give it to somebody else when you're done."
Oh, nice. I like that.
Yeah, and just keep passing it around, because I do think that message is that's what Rhonda's job was. I think
Right.
to introduce us to this concept, and I just cannot imagine a better way of doing it. I'm so impressed with what she came up with, the perfect introductory to the law of attraction, and it's her mission. It's who she is. I am. That's who she is.
That's very good. Well, that's a great note to end on. Unfortunately, we're kind of over time here, but as usual, this has been fabulous. Thank you for spending the time, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.
All right, well, thank you.
All right, we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.